No world unexplored, no tome unread, no dice unrolled.
Hi Thorny Games, and in particular hi Akan and hi Catherine. Thank you for being here, and thank you for accepting this interview. We are great fan of your games. We want to play Dialect Sign, also the new one that is
Xenolanguage.
That one. But let's start from the beginning. You create so many particular role-playing games. Is there any particular font of inspiration for you? Maybe reality, maybe something else?
Thank you for having us, and we're loving being in Italy at the Play Festival in Modena. So for us, in making things, a lot of it draws on our backgrounds as people. My background is as a linguist, a computational linguist, and Hakan is a cryptographer. And so both of those have to do with communication and thinking about, how to actually convey ideas, feelings, interesting things to other people. And I think there's so much about communication, how it works, where it falls apart, that's so interesting, especially for story, and that motivates a lot of what we make.
And I would just add one little thing to that. One of the things I think is true about all of our games too is they do tend to start from, even though they draw on our backgrounds, they do start from different places a lot of times. Sometimes they might be based on a true story, sometimes a concept, sometimes a mechanic. They can all start from very different points and kind of end up in a fleshed out game where you might not even know where it started from anymore. But I don't think we tend to start all the projects in the same way. They tend to just be whatever excites us enough to honestly power us through the years it's going to take to make this thing.
Free inspiration, so.
Was it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's focus on Dialect for a while. I had an impression that it could highlight also the difficulties of some isolated languages. Mm-hmm. Is it also one of the inspiration for Dialect? I mean, those languages spoken by a really small group of people, probably isolated from the people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the big themes in Dialect is just how many languages are dying on a yearly basis across the world, right? As more and more technology brings us together and allows communication across, on a global scale, the less, individuality kind of remains unless we consciously fight for it in a lot of situations. And so that's one of the big things that Dialect tries to highlight in its design.
But I will add too to that I think that it's also trying to get at something that's more general for everyone, sort of this experience of being part of a language community, like a way of, understanding between different people that's just reflected in the way you speak and the stories that you share together. I think about the people I went to school with versus my family versus my con friends, right? All of us have different stories. We show up as different people in those places, and all of those are ways of, highlighting how language can change from person to person and how it connects us. So I think Dialect is meant to draw out some of those particular stories.
And that's so interesting because, in my opinion, the way you communicate, the way you speak, is the way you give a shape to your word.
Yeah.
So it's like connecting different words.
I love how that's said. Yeah.
And for the next question, I will give the microphone to this guy, Alessandro, who is, I think, a student, a linguistic student. So,
one of them. Sorry. I'm studying at the university right now, and one of the various subjects that I study is linguistic, general linguistic and Italian linguistic. So, awesome. I want to ask you if you think that Dialect could get more people to approach to the linguistics and its themes.
Yeah. maybe, and we hope so. We would love that. I think, we didn't make it as an educational tool. Sometimes people play it in universities. Really, we made it for everyone to play, just to be a fun thing, to experience a really immersive, interesting story that you might not be able to experience without a rule system that's helping you do it. But I think that what's amazing about language, and I'm curious what you think too here as a linguist, some of the things that I love so much is just realizing how complicated it is, and yet it's so easy in some ways, so natural. But when you look at it very closely, there's so much in it. It reflects identity and community, culture, all of that stuff. And the idea that dialect is maybe helping people spend a moment and thinking about the stories that are connected to language, and hopefully that would bring them to wanting to be thoughtful about how they use language, how it connects them to different worlds and to each other.
To answer to your questions, I think it's the same for me, because especially for Italian, Italian is a very complex language on the grammar and all the rules that there are. But when I think, wow, but I can speak Italian so naturally, so fluent, and I don't think about these rules, all these complex mechanism, and then I think about the story of Italian, on how it evolved from the various dialect that was in the various zone of Italy and other things, and think, wow, it reflects a lot of about how Italian people and how we evolved and how we form a unity under the same language and the same flag.
Yeah.
Okay, again to me. For now, we talked about let's say the cute and the interesting aspect of your game. Now let's speak about the sad moment, the sad aspect, the end. For what I read about it, Dialect immediately shows to the player that the game won't end well. The language, in a way or another, will die. This is very interesting, because you start playing something and you already know that it won't be a classical success, let's say so. How did the first player, the playtester, and the players now reacted to this?
So the first players didn't react to this at all, because this wasn't how it first started. When we first started playtesting, which was a terrible game, we actually tried to do something where, like, you would have these new words, and like every time you used a word in a conversation, you would put a token on it or something, and once you had enough, you could like affect the narrative in certain ways. It was a bad game.
Train wreck.
Yeah, it was a train wreck of a game. We're surprised that some of the people who played in it still talk to us. And so the fact that we narrowed that on was something that we had to learn, as being, okay, this is a story we want to tell, right? And not all movies are happy, not all books are, lighthearted, and this game is going to be sad in some way. It's still up to the players how they interpret that exactly, but it was important that be a part of it. I'd say another big reason, though, that we did that is having something like that's so intimate as language, and the fate of that language be determined by something you did at the table, dice you rolled, different ways in which you manipulate the mechanics, I think really felt like it could undermine just how real and difficult of a problem this is in the real world, right? It's like, I guess we're losing all these languages just because people didn't roll enough sixes or something, right? Like, that's not how it is. Actually, people are working very hard to preserve their languages, and a lot of times they're still not successful, and it requires a lot of effort. And so anything that we could do in the game that was kind of mechanically trying to recapture what it meant to fight that didn't feel right. It felt like it was trivializing the problem in some way. And so that's why that's part of the inevitability in it. Though, people have raised that, it does potentially communicate that maybe that's the way that all minority languages are going to end up, right? Because that's the only pathway in the game. And so we try to make it as clear as possible through the types of stories that are being told, through other resources in the book, that like this is a problem, that there are at least ways to try to fight, even if we don't want to imply that there's a guaranteed approach to solving them.
As I said before, it is sad, but it is true. So it's correct. Moreover, I think that this aspect highlights the fact that the journey is more important than the destination. So all the way that you run until the end of the language is the most important part of the experience.
Sure.
Okay, so Alessandro will make the next questions.
Thank you. So we talk about dialect now. I think it's time to talk about Sign. The latest of your game is arrived in Italy, and I have a question. So we know that Sign is inspired by real events and explores the themes of the creation of a language from a difficult perspective. What's it the premise that lead this project to be a LARP played in a single room? Why do you think it was more efficient to create a LARP than the tabletop mixed with role-playing games elements or something new?
Well, the very boring answer is because we came up with it from a LARP writing challenge, and so the very first version of Sign was written as an entry to the Golden Cobra LARP writing challenge, which is global LARP writing competition. But independently of that somewhat facetious answer, there's a lot about Dialect. I think fundamentally has to be a tabletop game because you need this ability to go between omniscient narrator of the story almost, right? Someone who's telling the story of this grand community and someone who's actually playing as a member of that community. For Sign, though, we want to tell a much more intimate story, right? A story about a particularly group of kids in this, semi-fictionalized account that are going through this emotional journey individually and really getting that additional player embodiment that you can get from LARP in order to get that additional emotional resonance and that bleed between your character being understood and the player being understood was all reasons why we opted for LARP rather than tabletop, where I think there's a much more natural separation between player and character, right? Your character isn't sitting at a table, your character isn't like staring at paper, right? But for a LARP, those lines are much more blurred.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just would say that interaction was a very basic part of what that game was and what inspired just the idea of going on the journey of co-creating language out of play. And interaction was fundamental to that.
Okay, thank you. And another question, this is about do you think that Sign can be used in an educational context, perhaps even with people with disability?
Yeah, so it was really important to us while we were making that we got adequate input from folks, from the deaf community and from the Nicaraguan sign language community in particular. And so it does incorporate a lot of feedback, both from that in terms of the historical accuracy and, for playability concerns as well. So in certain contexts, it definitely is suitable for that. I think that in general, it's a very intimate question whether or not this is going to be suitable for any one individual person. So that'll be something that they'll need to evaluate it personally. But we did try to make it as inclusive as possible given the consultations we did and the different kind of factors we tried to consider during design.
Yeah, the other thing that I would add to just is that it was important to us as part of making this project and our own relationship with the sign language education in Nicaragua, that any proceeds from it go directly to that foundation and in support of that. And in the question about educational contexts, we've seen the game played in many places, and it's always exciting when people find it as an interesting tool to use. One of the ways that we've seen it played is actually in uniting people who don't speak the same language. Maybe that is people who are signers, as well as people who speak different spoken languages that can come together, and that because most of the experience is done through individual rule sheets and cards, can have a more interesting interaction and play together through this game.
Okay, wonderful. The last question will be Andy to do.
Okay, last thing, I swear. So, we noticed that you launched and successfully founded a new Kickstarter project, Xenolanguage. Okay, we give it a look, but we didn't understand and see so much. So we had the impression that you had something in common with maybe board games too, or some elements maybe. And the question would be, could you tell me something more about it, please?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So Xenolanguage is a game about a group of people who are called on a mission to decipher an alien language. It's inspired by media like Arrival, if you've seen that movie, or older books like Contact, the short story that Arrival was based on, and it uses a board that helps people uncover meaning in a number of alien symbols. And the cool thing about this board is that you can channel over it. If you've ever used a Ouija board, it's doing something similar, except it's a custom board with custom elements. And as you discover things about the alien language, so too you'll discover things about who these characters are and their connection to one another.
So nothing about alien demons.
No, you know, TBD, exactly. Yeah, many different flavors of aliens may come out in your interactions, and it also says something maybe about your psyche as well.
So, thank you for being here. I have to admit that your games have a special place in my heart because they managed to put together the love for tabletop RPGs, the love for these abilities of important matters, and something new for this community, and maybe more adapted to an adult kind of player. So, thank you again, and I hope to see you soon, and I wish you all the best for your next works.
Thank you so much. That was,
Thank you.
Very nice talking to you.
Thanks for staying with us. If you've enjoyed yourself, give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more content.